First of all, I'd like to tell you something personal. I don't do speeches anymore, really, and why? I had a stroke in October, so it's very difficult for me even to sometimes create sentences. And 6 months ago, I could not speak at all. So you're actually a part of my rehabilitation program. But to be honest, just bear with me. Sometimes it's a bit difficult, then it's just the stroke, so I'm still pretty smart, it's just less accessible. The IU is not perfect, but the storage is good, okay? So that's good to know. No, thanks. And I'm not going to dig into that, but I work pretty good in the mornings. And then like after 5, it's really like risky. But again, you can't be a real security professional if you don't accept risk, right? So it's fine. So why did I come here when I don't do speeches? I came here for some various reasons. First of all, I really think that you are very important people. I think the future makes cyber more important than ever. We're potentially the protectors of our society. And it's hard to understand, but sometimes if things get worse, you may be the most important people in this country. And we see evidence of that in other places of the world right now. Another thing is a community event. I really believe in sharing in the community, so I think it's important to participate in community events. And the third is, I never watched Mikko Hyppinen speak, so he promised to give the speech in English just so I can understand what the freak is saying. So these are very good reasons for me to do an exception for you guys. But I'm really honored to be here, and I think this is overwhelming what a cool event you all have made together. So what am I going to speak about? I normally speak a lot about the geopolitical situation and what's happening everywhere in the world. I'd like to make it different this time because it's a security audience. So I'd like to share my thoughts on what we can do better in cybersecurity. And this particular question is a question I ask myself every day. And I'm going to get back to that. I really ask myself, what can we do better? How can we change the way we work, the service we're offering, the stuff we do to make more impact? Because the threat actors, in a way, are winning. So that is the topic of today. If I can bring you some ideas that you may believe are good, then it can maybe change for the better. If you believe that my ideas are bad, it's okay too. It's all about perceptions and perspective. But when I say that, you probably wonder who I am. Why should I listen to another security guy, especially an older guy, in shirt and even a jacket? Why ever listen to that kind of dude on a community event with cool security people, hackers and stuff? So who am I today? I'm the founder of Truesec Group, which is 300 cybersecurity experts. But I started with nothing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about who I used to be. But today I advise government agencies, even the government itself in different countries. I work with problems like the one in Ukraine, etc. And I advise very important people that has a big impact. So it's very important that I have insights and stuff like that. I'm also getting lots of great prizes and stuff just because I'm old, not because I'm smart. But that said, this is who I was. This is where I tried to create some credibility in this community. That's actually a picture from, 2007 or something, I think, teaching about how to manually create a buffer overflow exploit and how it works and stuff for people. So I'm really a hardcore tech dude in the past. If you guys can read that, you can see it's a log onto an FTP server with the buffer filled with A's, and then there is different stuff like a return address, and then the NOP sleds, and you see no payload there. That's the next part of the demo. But so I used to do pen testing, red teaming, incident response, all that stuff. I trained as a trainer for Foundstone back in the days, like 20 years ago, in hacking, teaching people how to hack stuff. So I've done this all my career. Also, I'm a lieutenant in the Special Forces in Sweden, Kustjägarna, and I am also an Olympic Taekwondo person from the year 2000, before some of you were born. But I've always had an interest in like defense, security, and all that stuff. And as a computer geek, I bought my first computer when I was 10 years old, Sinclair ZX81, and I had to save money an entire summer to buy it, even though it cost like 100 euros. And the first movie in computing I saw was War Games when I was 12 in 1983, and it really changed my life. I strongly believe that that's why I work in cybersecurity, because I saw that movie as a 13-year-old person. It's kind of cool when I look at it that way. So, back to the topic. Are we currently successful? So we as a society, we as a community, as security people, are we doing a good job? Are we happy? What do you think? Are we satisfied? Do you think that we're actually securing Finland? It's like this. So this is a question I ask myself every day. And organizations are really suffering. These are only 2 examples that is currently being affected by ransomware. This is Rain Metal and ABB. ABB is a Swiss company, but it used to be part of the Swedish company because it was ASEA Brown Boveri, and ASEA was sold to Brown Boveri. So my Swedish heart was ticking a little bit extra when this company is suffering. And this is not an ordinary company. It's 105,000 employees. We're talking an Active Directory with millions of objects in it. You have no idea. VPN connections to their customers, vendors, everything. It's huge. And they have to go out publicly and say, we're hit by black basta ransomware. Then it's probably pretty bad. I can't talk too much about it. I may know very much about this incident, but I may not know very much about this incident. So you have to choose whether you want to believe me or not when I talk about this. But the fact is that they're really suffering. Can you imagine in the physical world, if someone goes into a company and destroys 1,000 servers? That would be the biggest news in the freaking country. Like, they go in there and they destroy this physically, like hammer them, shoot them, and burn them. They are destroyed. That would be so big. But when it comes to the cyber world, it's like, oh, ABB is hit. It actually made some computer news. It's crazy. You know, it's really big impacts on our society. And I think, in all fairness, I believe that Finland is being less hit than most other countries in the region. And we're going to talk about that. But me, as being located and based in Sweden, we're really seeing a big problem. I'm going to give you some statistics later. But we are experts in doing IR. Why? Because it's happening. We have to be. So, and I think you have to prepare because you have to be experts too. If it keeps changing in the same way. Both these are, of course, also potentially a part of the geopolitical landscape. They're hit by Russian cyber criminals and black basta, which are not really attributed in a way that you can identify the individuals, but they appeared right after Conti disappeared. So there's a lot of assumptions that these are Conti ransomware group people. And I don't know if you know about Conti, but they disintegrated after the war because they declared war on Ukraine as a group. The problem is they had some Ukrainian in the group, so they outed all their data and made it pretty impossible for them to continue the work. So they didn't realize I have the enemy within. So they didn't really do the threat intelligence right. But that said, these are people that are probably very connected to Russian, pro-Russian interests and Kremlin interests. So they're not just acting to make money, they're also acting in alignment with the Kremlin agenda. And we see that a lot in Sweden. And it changes things. You're now a member of NATO. I wonder how that's going to affect you. I don't know. But I don't think it's for the better. And every time this happens, it's actually a defense failing. And this is what it looks like when when you're a goalkeeper and you let the ball through the net. But every time it's a failure. And to give you some insights in my team at Truesec, we did 160 complex IR engagements last year. That's less than the year before. because some people were occupied in Ukraine. So that's 30,000 hours of pure IR experience working in IR cases. We have 35 full-time people doing IR all the time, and an extended team of 65 people doing IR cases when they need to. I don't even think you can, at least last year, you could not even have 35 people working full-time in this country in IR purely alone. So I think it's going to pick up, and that's just our team. We're not the only one. So far this year, we've done 74 IR engagements, and now last night I called the leader of the IR team, and he said we have 8 ongoing IR cases, 5 of them are ransomware. So this is real life. Each one of these is a failure from the companies, but also from the security industry. We're not convincing them or helping them or facilitating defenses so that they can stay away from attacks that are really impacting the business. It's a fact. I think we need to realize that. It's much more valuable if we realize it now than after the big peak is coming eventually, potentially. Also, we talk a lot about ransomware, but of course there are other things, other cybercrime activities. Putin last year ordered FSB to go after Western digital assets. He said, literally, which you could read in the papers, you have to start getting IP from the other tech companies or the defense industry in the Western world because we are sanctioned. So it's your job now to bring home the knowledge so we can produce our own stuff. And that's not just defense industry. So ransomware is pretty clear. You know when you're hit with ransomware. I promise you that. You will definitely know. When you're hit with the industrial espionage, you don't know. So there's more going on. And almost every time we investigate a ransomware attack, they have also stolen amounts of data. You know what's funny? Many of the other cyber companies that do investigations, their IRs don't say that they have data leakage every time. So I think it's just because they use more tools-oriented investigations. If you really create a track from exactly what happened, then you will find it. It's also about doing real investigations. And then there's a problem because with GDPR and other laws, sometimes they don't even want to know if they lost data. So it's really troublesome. You had some data exfiltration. No, don't. We don't need to know. So it's really problematic, to be honest. So will it get better? Well, we have a department looking very much at Russia. The Duma, which is the high court in Russia, they recently proposed a new law that says it's okay to be a cyber criminal in Russia as long as you make your activities according and in alignment with the Russian narrative. So they're proposing that it's okay. And this may sound very controversial, but this is a very old methodology. Even from the medieval ages until 1850, it was legal to do piracy because the governments and kingdoms believed that that was a good thing for the country. If you can break down their ships and steal their stuff, they will end up in my country where we become a richer country. So it's actually adopting an old methodology that has been very successful in the past. Then we all agreed before we all were born that it was a bad idea. But they're reinventing this in cyber. That's how immature cyber is. The laws doesn't work. You can do whatever you want to if you have the country behind you. This is just some stuff I grabbed off the internet for a Fortinet report that's very recent. Why did I bring the Fortinet report in? Because we only see the stuff that really happens, that we are called from customers saying we have a problem. When you do inquiry with CISOs in the world, like they did, you ask them, truthfully, did you have a ransomware attack last year? Then 50% of the corporations in this survey actually had a ransomware attack. And if you look at the statistics, the blue, some of them have had twice or 3 ransomware attacks. The problem is that the majority has, now the stroke comes in, I have to find the word. They have a policy to pay the ransom. So they never call us or any other IR team. They just pay the ransom. So I think this is very worrying. So how can we become better? The rest of the session is some tips and some pointers, what we could do to change the game a little bit. Tip 1, and I start from the little bit boring but important part, and I try to make more interesting stuff. So if you're a hardcore pen tester, reverse engineer, it's still valuable to understand this. Build capabilities in the right order. Normally when the big 4 or some big company like that comes into an organization and say, we're going to create a security program. You need cyber maturity. You need to go from where you are today until something better. You understand this, right? You can nod at this. So I know that you're listening. Good. So the typical, you know what this is? Tell me Finnish people know the NIST model. Yeah, you know it. You just don't want to speak to a Swede that says he can't speak. But this is pure NIST model. The idea is that different capabilities you should identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The problem with this, how people approach it, the way I see it from personal perspective, is that I've heard so many times, we're going to drive you through a NIST program. And you know what? And this is the pitch. Does anyone work with PwC here? Hands up. So you may be annoyed, but someone has to be the example, right? So you can make fun of me sometime in the future. It's fine. But the typical, I heard PwC say this to customers many times. They have this thing. I'm going to try to stand up and speak. It's more challenging, but I get the feeling now. The people I worked with in PwC, which are good people, I just disagree with the methodology, okay? So, yeah. Okay, I feel a little bit like what's going to happen now. Yeah, I promote PwC here, but I have this senior manager who always goes to customers and says, how many computers do you have in your organization? And the guy answers, the CISO or whatever, IT manager says, well, we have something around 10,000. Do you have exactly 10,000, or is that just a round number? I don't know exactly. If you don't know exactly what you have, you can't protect your environment. And that sounds to me pretty okay, right? In theory, how could you protect stuff unless you know what you have? So in theory, that's great. What happens in reality is that they sell a project where they start with inventory of all the computers, inventory systems and stuff. It runs for 6 to 12 months. And then they try to really identify and keep track of everything they have, the assets, the computers, the applications, the identity, all that. Good thing in theory, right? The problem is after 4 months, they're having a ransomware attack. So now they invested 300,000 euros so far in the security project. They didn't even get any capability that were doing inventory. But 50% of the organizations had ransomware attacks last year successfully. So this is the problem. It's not optimal in reality. So when we work with customers, we say, first of all, you need eyes on the ball. So we need detection first. I don't care if you know exactly what you have. You probably know that you have computers, and you probably know how to talk to them. So if we can just get surveillance that actually has capabilities, I'm going to talk about that later, that will change, that will give you time. And it doesn't matter if you have good detection, if you don't have response capabilities. So this is a priority. And then, of course, you need to take away some of the obvious problems, like the passwords on the internet-facing services and stuff like that. And of course, you need some kind of backend strategy that's better than the one you have. And then last but not least, you actually need to okay, let's get this straight. We need to know what we have. So this is controversial, but I think it really works. They sleep better at night and they have less incidents. Because the other way around is, we look at all the stuff we have. Now we've done that. Now we start the project of protection. So now we're going to implement a lot of protection. Still, when they have a breach, they didn't fix all the holes. I can tell you that. Who has a vulnerability-free environment? Who has seen one with more than 2 computers? It's very hard, right? So it's a great vision, say, like we're not going to have vulnerabilities in an environment that can be exploited. But it's such a hard undertaking. It's much easier to detect breach. I know that from experience. So this is actually good. By knowing this, you can drive organizations in prioritizing, in the big picture, more important, valuable stuff in the right order. It can actually change the game. And then I think it's about being surgical. We use this model in different fashion. I mean, we're not trying to change the NIST model, it's fine. But we talk about capabilities with prediction instead of. So we look at the model from like before breach, for and after, and during. So we want capabilities to predict breach. We want to understand how a breach is being done. How will an organization be attacked in the future? By understanding exactly what will happen to them, or try to figure it out, like the weather. If you're going to Croatia and you know it's going to rain, you bring the raincoat. If there's going to be sunny, you bring the sweat, the shirt, whatever you're going to. I don't know what you wear on the beach. It's up to you. But yeah, why am I even thinking? I'll see myself. Yeah. Anyhow, the thing is that prediction is very important. So I think we use prediction a lot to see what vulnerabilities to look for. I'm going to get back to that. To know what to try to detect. To change our response operations and to set recovery processes right. It's very different to do backups after ransomware incident than it is doing backups from a lost database. It needs a very different process. So if you understand how they do it, it's going to be different. So prediction is an enabler. And if I had more than 45 minutes, I would dig into this, but I don't. Tip number 3, and I think this is the most important part from my word, because this is the one that you think you should focus on first. You see me good, but you don't see the screen. You can come up here if you want to. You can see it from both that end of this. But okay, tip 3, optimize your breach detection. And I think many organizations only have an alert flooding service, and that may sound funny, but it's not. I work with very large customers. Some of them actually have thousands of alerts every day in the SOC operation. What is the real value of that? What can you do with that data? It's like digging for gold, but your hands are so full with sand, so you haven't really dug. You just took the ground. You need to find a way to find the gold. So, and again, back to like, should we do better? This is the typical black basta modus operation. So this is what hit Rainstorm and ABB. So you typically, you get the phishing email, you have some smart techniques to kind of make it don't look like you're executing code, but you are, because it's the normal stuff, macro, JavaScript, stuff like that. Sometimes they actually use OneNote and embed stuff in it, and they try to be tricky, but it's basic stuff. 10 years ago, they were using similar techniques. And then they installed their Quackbot things. And it's pretty sophisticated in a way. They even have EDR circumventions and stuff. Actually, in some installations, they actually have a fake Windows Defender splash screen and stuff. So they turn off Windows Defender, but they actually give you something that you can click on that looks like a Windows Defender icon, and up comes a fake Windows Defender thing. So it's like, yeah, if you don't see what happened before that, you will be blinded. Then they do Cobalt Strike, which is normal. They do normal lateral movement with PSX and RDP. That is so common, it's almost lame. It would be lame, but the problem is that it works. I can tell you right away, this is what happened in this incident. So, shouldn't we be able to detect this? 2023, right? Like PSX. It is a Microsoft binary because Rusinovich sold this company to Microsoft, System Journals. So it's actually signed, but still, we know it's used for bad stuff. And it's even one of the lamer tools because it's very visible, it's hard, it's not being detected. So my assumption is we need to do better. So when we do breach investigations, most of the organizations that are being breached are big organizations that actually have invested in SOC delivery. They use this approach. They share that in common. Most of them are having a vendor that actually give them a capability, but it's CM-centric. I'm not saying CM is bad. I'm just stating the fact. The organizations that are being breached are to the majority CM-centric when it comes to the detection, and they all share the problem that they detected it too late. That is just a fact. So why? Well, the CM-centric detection is a very good idea. You have a competent database where you can do searches and rules, etc. And then you digest all the data from all the different systems, right? As much as you ever can. Any vendor will try to sell you as much of logging as they can, especially the ones that will actually charge you by consumption. So ingest all your logs from all your network devices, computers, etc. And if they use EDRs and stuff, they're just going to alert from the tools, and then they're still going to ingest them in the CM. Why? Because they can have a not very experienced first line, and they don't have to take responsibility for detection because you have use cases and playbooks that you as a customer agree to. So the agreement actually, I instruct you, the vendor, if you use an external SOC, you can have an internal too, so you have to apply this depending on what. But you, the vendor, should look for the stuff that we told you to look for, and then when you find it, you're going to give us an alert back. So you can't fail. Implement the rules, the alerts will come, and you forward the alerts. The problem is, you're getting a lot of sand with the gold. And with a blockbuster attack, this is happening before you detect it. Because you have such a backlog with all the alerts. A day or two can be way too late. We need to find them in 15 minutes before they start to really install themselves and do bad stuff. So you nearly need a different approach. So the approach I would vouch for, not saying you can't do any better, you may find a better solution, but one thing is sure, this CM-centric solution, many of the times, it can be a hybrid too. They can have a special CM-centric way of doing it that's good. I don't argue that. But it's focused on producing, the output is alerts. So to me, this is an output-centric solution. You manage rule books, and you manage logs, and you manage alerts, and you forward them to customer. Then they have to take responsibility for what to do next. The XDR-centric solution is very different. It requires more work. It doesn't scale as good. It's more expensive, but I think that we have very few customers that have big incidents that have an XDR-centric solution. You can, of course, implement a bad XDR-centric solution or a good one, but the way I see it, if you have specialists that work in purpose-made tools for detection, especially EDR. Why? If you look at, for example, Ukraine, They had a bunch of attacks last year, unless you knew. But more than 2,000 attacks on organizations in Ukraine was recorded by the SOC, by the CERT in Ukraine, CERT UA. I work and I know people in the SOC. So more than 90% of them were detected by EDR. It's kind of interesting. 2,000 incidents, the absolute majority is detected in EDRs. And the investment in the countries that don't have much experience in incidents, they still focus a lot on CM-centric solutions. So that if that can change, you will defend your country and your organizations better. But then you need to learn the tools. You need to work in the tools. You can't just forward the logs to the CM because it's detection and response. When you work in the tools, you will actually be able to mitigate in the tools directly and you save time. You can't look in the CM. Oh, something happened in computer XYZ 20 minutes ago. Let's see. Oh, we didn't even have EDR. What to do? I don't know. Something. It's too late. Or they have an EDR. How do I log on? I don't know. I don't work in this tool every day. So, and as a matter of fact, when we do EDR detection, even if you use Microsoft EDR, for example, Defender for Endpoints, we detect more than 50% of the real incidents in custom rule sets. Many people just ingest into CM. They make the custom rules in the CM. So that's too late. Our detections in the EDR, which is more purpose-made, will never end up there. And I'll tell you one simple rule. These are like trade secrets, if you will. I'm happy to share with the competition because I really want you to detect breach. So one of our the biggest capability rules are the simplest ones. Well, one rule, for example, if a script calls internet, it's potentially bad. Can you imagine how many false positives you're going to get? When a script calls internet in, let's say, ABB, which has millions of objects, thousands of servers, and massive thousands of clients. Well, our approach is, we have several of these rules. It is potentially bad, so we ingest that into the customer search. So every time a script calls internet, it's an alert. But we don't deliver the alerts to the customer. That starts an investigation, deep analysis. So every time this alert is triggered, we say, okay, now a script called internet. Is it good or bad? Oh, it was a deployment script that is used by the organization regularly. It's good. We whitelist it. After 6 months, that's a very good rule. When something happens, it's not something they had for more than a week in the environment. So either they created a new script, or it's a threat actor. That we can actually manage. The onboarding is tough. But when you do the work, you actually have a very strong rule. And the problem is, threat actors today, they will test Defender and they will test CrowdStrike. So the out-of-the-box searches, they're going to work their tools until they know that they can circumvent it. So the custom rule sets for us detects more than 50% of the bad stuff. That is immensely valuable. And you know what? What 50% do you think it detects? The simplest stuff or the more dangerous stuff? The more dangerous stuff. The business impactful stuff. So that approach alone is very valuable. But then you need to start to learn to use the tools. EDRs, NDRs, CDRs, cloud detection and response, IDRs, identity detection and response. And of course, CM is a very good log storage. You can do searches, you can contextualize things. So CM still makes a good sense. But it's not purpose-made for detecting bad things happening in a computer. It's purpose-made for taking lots of data and make good searches. And even act upon it. Then you call it SOAR. So I think this is really, really valuable. So this approach will not deliver alerts. This will deliver incident detection. and hopefully also disarm and respond capabilities, if you have them. So my advice to you is to tell your organizations or the people you're helping, make sure that you don't buy an alert delivery function. Make sure you buy a detection capability that can also do quick response. That's a game changer. These ones get breached, these ones don't. It's a fact. I have statistics from 100 incidents every year. You can have a presentation later, this is just the same shit I said. So in the Truesec SOC, again, I'm not promoting the SOC, I don't care. I'm just giving away my secrets for free. So the stuff that is an advantage, I'm giving it away because I want the competition to do the same. Because it will, in the end of the game, we will help the society more. But this is the incident per endpoint. That's a true positive in our SOC. This is what we deliver. And the numbers are interesting. Out of 10,000 endpoints, at an average, we have around 1 to 2 incidents every month. So if you have a 10,000 computer company, then you will receive about 1 or 2 bad things every month. Normalized. So if you get 500 or 1,000 or 100,000, it's probably bad. There's a lot of sand in that. And it's when you really do that work, you can also use statistics. This year, the yellow is this year, it's really picking up. And you know what's funny in the SOC? We see direct correlations between the SOC detections and the ransom attacks and attacks that happens in the society. So whenever we see a peak here, we know that 1 or 2 months later, there's going to be a peak in incidents. So we can actually foresee incidents in the SOC because we really do threat detection. So the ones that don't have the good detection capabilities, they will get breached. So we know for a fact that this big peak that's happening right now, it creates more incidents in May and June by statistics. So I actually have a tool to tell in Sweden and Finland and some other countries what's going to happen in the trend in ransom attacks. Pretty interesting. So I have some SOC customers in Finland, but not enough to have good statistics. But we're getting there. But it would be very fun. I'm going to get data to say how does this compare, for example, Sweden to Finland. My assumption is that Finnish would look lower. Maybe it's not true. But we found that is there less attempts? Because these are attempts to breaches. Tip number 4, I have 6 minutes. Focus on the right vulnerabilities, and this is a sensitive one, even internally. You know, I have like 30 pen testers employed in my organization, and when I say, you know what, I don't think pen testing is the best way of finding vulnerabilities. You think that's popular? They love to do pen testing, it's the best ever. They're so very good at what the freak they're doing, and I used to be pen tester, it was the coolest thing. The old version of me wanted to be as technical as I could, so I could show off what an advanced guy I was, finding most advanced security things. The new version of me just want to help companies to find the one vulnerabilities that will actually be a part of a future breach. That's the only thing that matters. See if you can find the most obscure, difficult thing to research, to find. You may be the only one to find this, and you may be the only one investing 40 hours in finding a vulnerability. So it may never be exploited by a threat actor, especially if it's a purpose-made application in your environment, especially if it's somewhere inside the environment, not internet-facing. Because we know, for example, that Blackbuster, they're going to use RDP and PSX. You know, so they're not going to exploit internal applications with obscure methods. We just know that from all the investigations. In theory, they could, but in practice, they don't. They may tomorrow, and then we have to include that stuff. But I want to find the vulnerability that will actually be used by threat actors. Those are the valuable ones. So I talk to CISOs, like big companies. One guy, Michael, he tells me, Marcus, can you help me? We are doing all these different activities. We pen test all our applications. We do vulnerability scanning. And we have a backlog of, I think, 500,000 vulnerabilities with various CVE scores. So, of course, they fixed the 10.0 very fast, and the 8s and the 9s. But the rest, they're just there. And they have 100,000 vulnerabilities. So I'm like, and he said, Marcus, I need to shift the trend, because if I could prove that we don't have more vulnerabilities every year, then it would be good for me. The CEO would actually increase my salary. I'm measured by that. If you could bring it down to 50%, it would be awesome. If I could have 50,000 in the backlog, not 100,000. Does it make sense? So then I tell him, you know what? I could give you the 99,900 vulnerabilities for free, because they are not worth anything unless you fix the 100 most important ones that's going to be used by threat actors. I could charge to give you that information, that data, because that's the game changer. Because the threat actors, we know what they're doing when they breach organizations. Of course, there are always some special cases. Something new and novel is always happening. You need to be aware of that too. But in general, most of these attack waves are being done in various different ways, but if you sum them all up, it's about 100, 200, maybe 500 vulnerabilities. So a backlog of hundreds of thousands doesn't make any sense. And have you ever ran like a vulnerability scan in a large environment? It produces a lot of data. It's just information overload. It's sand. We need to find the gold. So we work a lot with finding this stuff. And first you try to take away the 100, and then you take away the next 100. That's the game changer. It's a simple strategy. Find the stuff that matters. And it's not scored by CVE. Because if it's a very bad vulnerability, but it doesn't really have exposure, it's sitting in your OT network. It's a really bad vulnerability, but you don't have any internet connections. You have to go through the entire office network into the backbone to enter the OT network. You know, I've done so many investigations when OT equipment was included. The problem is that in reality, they don't use exploits on OT systems. They compromise the domain, they take credentials, they take an OT administrator's laptop, and they connect using his credentials to the OT systems. So you can work all you want to with OT vulnerabilities, but the threat actor is going to just connect. So it's very important that you find the lateral movement problems and the entry problems and all that stuff. Those vulnerabilities are very important. So that is a game changer. So the way we look at it, our incident detection, our external threat intelligence, our IR engagement, our vulnerability intelligence, that's very, very important data on what's being used in the wild today and tomorrow. There's a log4j. Well, you need to have a way to know if you have log4j in your environment, especially if you have the unpatched log4j. And you know what? You actually need to know a week after it was exposed to be used in the wild. So yearly pen tests won't help you. You need to not only find the vulnerabilities, you need to find them continuously over time, and you need to have a way to look for vulnerabilities being exploited in the wild very fast. That's the reality. You can set up any strategy, but that's a fact. If you can take away vulnerabilities being used in the wild very fast, then you minimize the risk of being hit by them or by the threat actors using them. So we tend to use IR a lot to know what to look for. Then we do all the scanning, but we look at vulnerability scanning, but we need to do analysis. And I'm for everything. You can do vulnerability hunting, bug bounty, pen test, red team, code, call it what you want. But you have to have continuous capability to look for important vulnerabilities in your environment. They need to contextualize, analyze, and prioritize. Is this vulnerability really exposed? Is it going to be part of an attack chain, yes or no? Otherwise, it doesn't have to be fixed now. It can be fixed later. You want to find the stuff that will actually be used in an attack. That's a game changer. You can't fix them all, so fix the one that matters. So I bet you, out of 100,000, you may end up with 100. And then again, when you're done, you have another 100, another 100. It's a never-ending story. But this has to be a continuous process over time. And then, of course, it doesn't really make a difference if you find the vulnerabilities unless you do mitigation improvements. And I look at vulnerabilities, not just traditional vulnerabilities. Posture management is also very important. We see a lot of problems, like, for example, an organization implement MFA, but they don't disable legacy capacity to use passwords. Is that a vulnerability? No, it's not a vulnerability, but they're breached because of that. So then you need to handle it. So posture management is becoming more important, especially in the cloud. In the cloud, we can't really do a lot of stuff, depending on what layer of cloud we buy. But we can always do posture management. Do we configure it correctly? I've seen a lot, like data being exposed in the cloud, very simple to access. I have 0 minutes. That one I talked about. Backup strategy. I think you need a strategy that will support the ransomware scenarios. Again, we do a lot of this. When you have 1,000 servers encrypted and you're going to restore, you can't just restore data. You need to restore the applications, the integrations, the configurations, the identities. You should start to back up computers. And of course, they disable the backups, or they erase the backups if you don't have the backups separated from the threat actor. They can't be dependent on the domain, just using credentials to log on and erase them. You need to protect the backups from the threat actor, to back the good stuff up. And when you restore 1,000 computers, hardware and networking, I/O is going to be very important. You need to have a plan that will actually solve this. If you belong to the 50%. Use specialists from the start. The biggest problem for us when we do IR engagement is when they start to try to fix it themselves first and call us later. Sometimes we can actually restore the organizations fully without backups because we can do very special things. Even decrypt using custom decryption techniques because we can analyze or reverse the malware and stuff. Or we can use features built into Windows like snapshots, techniques and stuff that are there if we can really fast get access to the systems. Many times they're destroyed by the people before us. So use specialists from the start, at least one. They can tell you what to do. I don't have time. How much time can I have? 5 minutes, thank you. You know when you're doing something wrong, and you know he's there, and like, when am I going to be over the top? Okay. So tip number 8, I think I have 9 altogether. Own third-party risk. Last year, we did a lot of third-party investigations, and the biggest one we did the year before that was Coop. Sweden was shaken by that. 600 grocery stores down for a week by ransomware. You couldn't buy food. In some places in Sweden, that was the only store. They were actually offline. So it can really affect society. But it was actually 1,200 companies that was hit by the same attack. So the tip is you need to own the risk. So you understand third-party attacks. Threat actors go to supplier, attack the supplier, and it will actually affect a lot of organizations. That's normal. Today, we have a lot of stuff in third party, especially in the cloud. So they are very good targets. And I'll take one example of an attack from this year. Have you heard about Iron Market? Iron Market is selling financial services to banks. So the banks logged on to remote connection with iron market with username password. It's funny because most of the bank customers were never allowed that internally, but when it comes to third-party service, it was okay, even though they have data, of course, in this context. The problem is the threat actor got hold of credentials. So he logged on using a customer account to the remote service. The problem is, even though it's a cloud service, most cloud services are actually just normal IT environments. They look like a cloud service, it's just a computer environment. So in this case, you could actually access from the RDP underlying hypervisors directly. So you use a VMware exploit to ransomware the entire infrastructure of the cloud vendor, and they stole data which was online. So the banks, the biggest banks in the world, couldn't deliver certain services because of this. But what struck me in this incident was how the freak could they buy a service from someone with this obviously lousy security? You just use username password to the internet to log on. It was bound to happen. And I still ask myself, how many other of those are still out there? We're not going to talk about Kaseya, that breach that our evil did, that affected Coop. It was horrible. It had vulnerabilities in the software with hard-coded similar to passwords. So you could actually enter, if you reverse engineer the agent of a Kaseya agent, you could find the credentials to log on to every Kaseya server in the world on the internet, and you could reconfigure all the system they controlled. It was so bad, I can't even imagine. And my team, they found 10 vulnerabilities like that in the software in one day. But it was very cheap, so they used it a lot. So the tip is really, you can transfer the risk to your, the workload to your third-party vendor, but you have to own the risk. You need to put controls on your vendor. It's important. And this is the last tip. Don't trust the threat actors. In Sweden, we are not NATO members like you are in Finland, because there is a big campaign that is intentionally trying to delay and damage the Swedish application for NATO. In Sweden, we have a group called Anonymous Sudan that are bringing a lot of media attention to the fact that Sweden don't like Muslims. I like Muslims, we like Muslims, but a person from Denmark flew up to Sweden, burned the Quran outside the Turkish embassy. So of course, Swedes are very bad, we hate that. The problem is we have followed Anonymous Sudan group for a long time. We know that they are a pro-Russian group based in Russia, posing as Sudanese people. But they made the news. They brought DDoS attacks, very simple attacks, to our airlines, to our government agencies and stuff. And Turkey picked up on that. That amplified the message of the Quran burning. So other Muslim countries and people, activists, they don't like us anymore. So actually affecting the image of the entire country, affecting the NATO process, democratic processes, our defense strategy, because of DDoS attacks. Not because they want to damage the companies, but because they want to amplify a message. And the biggest challenge for me was most of the papers said they must be Sudanese because they're saying that they're Sudanese. Because Swedes, and I guess Finns too, we believe that people are telling the truth. I'll tell you one thing, threat actors lie all the time. You can't believe anything. You have to be very pragmatic. What do they really want? And we have to educate the journalists and the society about this. It's a game changer. Otherwise, they can affect the society with very simple tools. And by that, that was my 5 minutes. So thank you so much for listening. And thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Marcus. We still have time for just a couple of questions, and then Mikko will be taking the stage. But any questions from the audience?
Yes, scream or come forward or whatever. Yeah. If you don't have a question, it means you really got it. Yes, question there.
Yeah, we have a mic coming.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you. Wonderful talk, by the way. In one of your slides, you mentioned know thy enemy. You yourself in an advisory role. On a high level, how do you advise your clients about the whole know thy enemy mindset when speaking about especially normal threat actors, not like APTs, etc.?
It's a very good question. I think that it's hard for, depending on the size of the companies, like big banks and stuff, they really try to build their own TI department. We see that it's a trend right now. It's very cool to have your own TI department. But I think from a bigger standpoint, we need to collaborate much more on this. There's, of course, a lot of collaboration going on in the government agencies and the big cybersecurity companies, but it's not really accessible to companies, to normal companies. So we need to do a much better job, and I invite WithSecure and Truesec and all the Nix and all the companies here, we should collaborate more and bring the data to the organizations that have SOCs, have detections. In Finland, there's a lot of small cyber companies. Some cyber experts start their own company. We should bring it to everyone, to them, so they can help their clients. But as of right now, I think you can buy services. The problem is to find the gold, not just the sand, because you can get all these threat actor lists or the IOC lists. They're very inaccurate. Some threat actor bought a service in Azure, and they used Azure, and then 2 weeks later, it's not being used by them anymore. It's used by a legit company. So the IOC doesn't have a date. So it's still pretty hard. So I think you should get services from organizations that can really provide TI, quality TI. Some are really good, some are really bad. I'm not going to promote commercial things on a community event, but that's something you should investigate. For most companies, I think it's very valuable to do a threat assessment, not about your internal problems, but what are the threat actors that would target us and what would they use? Also to create an understanding of what would a future attack look like. So a threat profile is valuable. That's something that I think everyone could do. And of course, you should have the basic stuff like leak detection, like dark web monitor and stuff. Yes, it used to be pretty worthless, but today, when your credentials are being sold on the dark web, you know that you will have attack attempts later on. So I think 2 simple services, some kind of good dark web monitoring, and some kind of profile of your threat landscape, like what type of actors. But I'll tell you this right now. 2 years ago, it was pretty obvious that there were certain groups that we could follow. Right now in Russia, something is happening. Lockbit is still very active. Some other black bastard, they're active. They have modus. But we see a lot of new groups coming out. It's very hard for us to track them, even though we have a department. But they're still using pretty similar vulnerabilities. Some are very focusing. We try always to use VPN vulnerabilities. They don't have good expertise. They use that. It works. And some people, they're buying access from access brokers. They have ransomware from ransomware actors, and they just do some pen tests, basically, trying to make a ransomware scenario. They can be very agile, very different. So it's hard to follow. But I think threat profile, understand that, dark web monitoring, and try to get a good company that will help you with detection and stuff. That's like the basics.
To the front. Yeah.
Yeah, nice presentation and talks. So basically, did I understand correctly that, so basically, ransomware is inevitable, so we should be prepared for it? So especially when ransomware are state-sponsored, like in this current geopolitical situation, like China or Russia or whatever. Just example, I would say. But did I understand correctly that we should be just prepared for ransomware attack and breaches and?
Yeah, I think it's good to be prepared. I think not being prepared is very bad for you. I mean, just know who to call. Like what process should we have in place? When we want to investigate computers, with what tooling? We should be more prepared, I think, in general. Did I understand the question right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions now. Thank you, Marcus.
If you have more
Yes.
questions, you can ask Mikko.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
a very smart guy. So.
Yeah. Thank you.